Welcome to our new project, Merry Christmas to All and to All a Good Night. This is painted on a bent wood box, okay, and it's got this beautiful scallop detail. Okay, it's got a gorgeous scallop detail. I am calling this an ornament keepsake box, okay, and what that means for me is that when you have your beautiful hand-painted ornaments every year, you can put them into a beautiful box and then set the box out at Christmas time to be able to just help decorate the season. Okay, the lid is painted. We've got this knob effect with this new, I'm trying to think of what they call these. They are book plates, maybe, I think. And they look like this, and then what I did, and this is a larger knob that you can find at in the lamp section of your hardware store. And then, so what I just did is I hot glued where the frame was, and then I glued my knob on top, and it just makes for a really nice centering piece. And then I also added hardware to the very front, which I also just hot glued. Okay, I think this is a beautiful project, and I'm really excited, but when I was getting ready to film it, impossible to paint on top of a round rolling thing. Tend to be hyperactive anyway, so what I did was I filmed it on top of this 2-set plaque, okay, and so that way I could film it on here and do it in a smaller size. So I just reduced the pattern just a little bit, and then I did a different effect with the words. So I've got the same kind of thing. I just took this piece of this pattern and I moved Santa over a little bit to create that. But what I wanted to show you was, this is our new surface line that is called they're Essentials. And what they are is they're just flat, square things. If you followed me with the rose project that I did not too long ago, it was a 4-inch one I made into coasters. Okay, so now this one I just stacked 2 of these and I glued them. Now what I'm going to do, we've got this fantastic display rack. Okay, it's beautiful. And if you look at the Elegant Herbs project on the website, if you put this on a wall somewhere, what you can do is you can just put your artwork right in there, and then it frames it beautifully, gives it a little top, a little elegant bottom. You can hang a tassel from it, hang an ornament from it, whatever. And then what you can do is take this out, and in goes your next season. So you've got this place on your wall marked, but you don't have to keep the seasonal display up. Then I've got another piece started with ovals that I've stacked, doing the background paper and the texture just like the roses. And then that could go very easily, once I have my clockworks in it, into our wall hanger as well. But you can stack these any way you want to. So like you could stack it off to the side, and then I just hot glue it down. Stack it off to the side. You can make multimedia projects with it. You know, if you wanted to do something like that, and then put a love word right there and do some cute little texture. We've got a lot of these architectural elements. Here, I'll show you my whole tray full. We've got keyholes in different finishes and different knobs, bunches of keys, decorative keyholes. I have been having way too much fun. I'm dreaming keyholes these days. Anyway, so that's a really fun little project. Or a fun, like, application, I guess. But then, like, we had a little creativity day, and Jessica, one of our graphic designers, did this with our stencils. And these are, in essence, just 4 plaques that we then can glue onto here. And she's got a wall art and they're so affordable. Like, they're essential because they're affordable. And then the last thing on doing multimedia type stuff, don't forget the Leaning Tower of boxes. These are paper mache, so why couldn't you certainly paint the same project? Sorry, we're playing musical project here. You could easily paint the Bentwood project on a much more affordable paper mache box, dress it up with the same hardware and stuff, and you probably would never know that you had something that was just made out of hard paper. Hope you enjoy the project. All right, I've painted the Merry Christmas to All and to All a Good Night project. And as I was prepping it, I realized that painting on this wonderful bentwood box would be very difficult to do on camera, especially with the camera overhead and that kind of thing. Just a very uncomfortable place to paint. So what I've decided to do is go ahead and I filmed the prep, so that's at the end of the DVD. And I'm going to go ahead and shrink or reduce down the pattern just a little bit and basically replicate it on these fantastic, what we're calling essential wood surfaces. And what these are is they're just 1/4 inch wood blanks that are perfect for stacking. Like I'm going to put this in the middle with my Santa scene here in my little village, and then I'll put the words around the frame. Okay, then I'm going to glue them together, and then they're going to go on an iron stand. It's wonderful looking. And you could also very easily paint on the, instead of the big bent wood box, you could paint on the paper mache boxes as well. And you can even dress them up. We've got this fantastic little finial and knob, and then a keyhole here. So we've got a brand new line of these that you could very easily do your own stacking with and just really dress the piece up. Lots of cute keyholes and things like that. And I just hot glued mine on. I did it on the rose coaster box as well. So there's a lot of options for what you can paint this project on. Bigger blanks, the scallop plaque was in the top running, the Anyway tray surface was in the top running. So don't think outside the box. There's a lot of things you could do with this. Alright, the very first thing we want to do with the surface like MDF or any surface that can be have an effect with any kind of moisture and things like that in the air is to go ahead and seal it. That's going to neutralize everything that's going on with the surface and isolate it from the elements. Okay, so you want to make sure you do a good job of sealing your surfaces. Alright, so I'm going to use multi-purpose sealer. And the way we do this, we just squirt some out. I'm going to use a varnish sponge, either wet or dry. I'm going to take my pieces apart. I don't need to obviously have them together yet. And then I'm going to grab a couple of these triangles. This is going to allow me to move a little bit faster than I normally could. Okay, it comes in a set of like 8 or 10 or something like that. What I'm going to do is coat this whole entire surface, and then I'm going to set it on top of these little triangles and it will dry, and then I can do the whole entire other surface and it'll be all dried by the time I get done with it all. So with the varnish sponge, it goes very quickly and very evenly with just the right amount of medium. What I really like about the varnish sponge, I've got my black nitrile gloves on. These are latex free. I have a latex allergy. But they're also chemical free, which means if you're staining or doing anything with chemicals, they're going to protect you. And I can't say enough about that. I've stained many times with gloves where the fingertips fell off because the chemicals were eating through the gloves. Anyway, you can take your varnish sponge. I'm on my non-stick mat, so if I get varnish, glue, anything like this on this mat, it will wipe off. But I can just wrap my sponge right around the edge and it seals the whole thing. Now I'm going to have a little bit of a blooble on the flat parts, but all I have to do to get rid of that is just go and wipe it down. Okay, so now I'm good on that side. It's wet. I feel it's cold through my gloves. Whoops. And now I can just finish varnishing it, and I'll do the same with the other piece of wood. Okay, some common questions that I get about the varnish sponge is, do you use it wet or dry? You can actually use it wet or dry, but if you're going to use it wet, make sure it's just damp and you squeeze out all the moisture. Can you use it for base coating and for varnishing? You know, can you interchange it? Absolutely, yes. What's nice about it is if you are doing a faux finish or something, or doing a varnish, generally speaking, if you keep your hands above the halfway, you can keep your hands out of the mess and you don't need gloves. In this case, I was touching both sides of the surfaces, and so it's better. And another thing, by staying within the lines, this is a DecoArt multi-purpose sealer. This seals, it adheres to all surfaces. I mean, absolutely every one of them. By staying within the product lines, then you're going to make sure that your chemical reactions work very well with each other. So you do want to pay attention to that. Make sure that you're not using something out of the line. I've had people who have asked me about why products make their banners curl. Well, sometimes it's because they're using a product outside the line to varnish and things like that. So be aware that when you're using paints and things, you are using chemicals. And the last question I keep forgetting about, to clean this, you just run it under cold water and just squish, squish, squish until you get a clean sponge. Then you just let it air dry. You can use them forever and ever for a long time. Sometimes they do stain because of the pigments in the paint, but that doesn't mean that it's going to color your piece that color. Just make sure the water is running clearly when you get done cleaning. All right, when your surface is dry, you want to take a sanding disc and lightly sand to smooth everything out. And then these have different grits on each side, so I can go with a lighter sand over here, and you can hear the difference. Okay, and that just knocks everything down. When you're going to make a project like this, where you're going to keep it around for years and years and years because it'll be a family favorite, then you want to make sure you take a lot of care with your finish and your prep so that it will last for a long time. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a blue brush. Well, you can see that I've tinted it blue because the dye and the color is so strong. But I'm going to use this giant oval glaze to base coat my piece just because I'm going to save a cleanup step and I don't have to worry about washing my brush and then coming back, or the sponge actually is where I'm getting. If I had a big piece and I wanted to go quickly, I would go ahead and just use the sponge and then clean that and come back. But since I'm going to slip slap with this later and my piece is fairly small, then I'm just going to mix a medium value blue, okay? And on a value scale, let's see if I've got one handy. On a value scale, you go from 10 to down at 1, and I want to have this color be where when I squint my eyes at it, it's going to disappear. And I'm actually way down here, probably at a 3. Okay, and so I probably could use just a little bit more. And we've got new business cards coming that you can request that have value scales on them while they last. Anyway, so then I'm going to go ahead and just base coat, brush mixing. I'm not worried about getting stuff on my mat. If you don't want the back of your piece getting any paint on it because it slides around, put it up on those little stands. And it doesn't matter if it's irregular because I'm going to do a whole bunch of slip slap and sponging on top. And I have to tell you, one of the things I was really glad about with the box, I got to this stage where I was doing the blues and I got a beautiful background going. And a lot of times I mostly design on camera. I don't design and then paint and then put it on camera. Anyway, I got a beautiful, very beautiful background going, but I was a little bit intimidated by how bright blue it was. So if you're looking at this color when you get it in front of your project and you're going, oh my goodness, yeah, I had the same hesitation. So I'm just brushing to smooth everything out. Doesn't matter if they're going in all different directions. I probably don't want a real delineated pattern. I'm also trying not to get my clothes covered in paint. Okay. Now what this will do for us when we're slip slapping is this will give us the ability to slip slap on top of this surface. But if I put my brush down and I grab paint, let's see if I can get some of that to do. Oh, obviously it won't do it, never mind. I'm trying to do this with the technique already done. If I had just the brown surface and was trying to slip slap on top of that, every time I put my brush down and lift off, then it will leave a brown mark where I lifted off, okay? And so we don't want brown marks, so we have to have one coat on there that dries, then we can go and do our slip slap technique on top of that. I'm going to lightly sand between coats. You want to address your edges. I'm probably going to make my edges dark. So right now I'm going to leave them alone until I get whatever the next coat is. I might do something contrasting, might do gold. Around the box it didn't look right to do any gold, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't look right to do it down here. Okay, we're going to take our big old brush that I didn't wash out. I just put it in the front of my water basin. For those of you who paint quite a bit, this water basin is a studio water basin, and it has, interestingly enough, 4 compartments in it. And the back one I always use for things like my sponge. It fits a big old giant sponge in there, and my hand fits down in there. I could squeeze it out. So I keep that clean, and I toss my my little daubers. These things, you just keep recycling them over and over. The stains don't matter as long as they don't get hard. They're good to use. I chuck them in the water for days and come back to them later when I'm ready to clean up. I can use my brush cleaner and restorer in here. It does not eat this kind of plastic, so I can get my brushes absolutely clean while I'm painting my project. And then the middle one is usually the one that I'll load like my water from. So this front one is my holding area for the mess, okay? That's where I'll rinse everything out and then I'll load here in the cleaner water. But to keep my brush fresh, I know I'm going to be back to it in just 10 minutes. I'm just going to rest it in the water. And one thing that I use all the time, and I never would believe it would be so important. All right, if you use a Raphael, it has a sable, fur, or hair. And when it's dry, it actually is, let's get you in a little bit closer, it's actually a really, really kind of an ugly little brush. Get you in tight. It looks really fuzzy and furry, and this is what I use to do all my lace with. Look how fat that is. Well, as soon as I get this brush wet and it soaks up water, just like our own hair, it takes just a minute for it to really, really get wet, then this whole thing comes to just a wonderful point. So what I do with that is I just put it in the clear water, and then I just lay it with water right across this handle. And I also put brushes like the Crescent stipple brushes and things like that that need to dry while I'm using them. And I'll just lay them right across there. They don't roll around. They don't really get in my way. I can move them forward if I want to still get in that. And it's a handy handle to carry off to the sink. Big, big improvement over your standard water basin. I cannot tell you. You can see how well used mine is. All right, I'm going to re-wet my surface with the color that I had on there. And the reason I'm re-wetting the surface is because I want to be able to, I'm going to use just a little bit of water because I don't really need a coat. I just need it colored. The reason I'm re-wetting the surface with this color is so that when I'm doing my slip slapping, the colors will blend together. Okay, and that means that I won't have these isolated. It's much easier to slip slap if you're blending colors together versus trying to move color on a dry surface without any blending going on. Okay. Get it all wet. Okay, now this is when things go pretty quickly. Okay, I want to get a little bit of drying time extender in my brush, and I'm going to wet the entire surface with the drying time extender too. This is going to give me a much more open time. Okay, now I'm going to wipe my brush out so that I don't end up with a big wad of that color in my brush. I don't want to make it another color right to begin with. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to start with the dark, which is Prussian blue, and I use the dark up at the top. We could bring down a little bit of that base blue, which is ultra blue deep. I just want to blend it until I'm liking the look, and then I'll go in and pick up a little bit more dark. Okay, and I want to do top and bottom. And we'll pick up a little bit more of the dark. If I need to, I can get into a little bit of my black as well. Don't want the color to get too dead, and the blue can be a little bit, the Prussian blue can be a little bit dead looking, but the ultra blue deep can be very, very electric looking. So did you see I wiped out my brush and I'm going back in for more Prussian. Now up there at the top where I want the Prussian to live pretty strongly, I'm not going to work it very hard, and I'm going to keep wiping my brush off. I don't want to have that, I don't want to lighten that color very much. And I'm just going like series of X's. Okay, walk it down, wipe it off when you need to. Go in and pick up a little bit of Ultra Blue Deep, and then transition those colors together. Okay, so now I've got a good sky slash middle ground. I've got the ground and then the sky up there. I'm going to pick up just straight white on my palette, and then here in my middle where I see things are drying, I may have to cry, I'm going to slip slap. I can pick up more extender, which will wake everybody back up a little bit. And I want to slip slap in a series. Whoops! Ooh, that was a big lot of extender. I'm going to wipe off that. And wake everybody back up. And then don't take it all the way out to the edges because we want to keep the eye in the piece. Okay, pick up extender as you need to. If you need to walk back into another color, you can do that. We don't want harsh lines surrounding us. I'm going to go into kind of a medium darkish down here. Blend that back up a little bit. Oops, a bit of white, no problem. You know, painting is all about the oopsie moments. So if you're not having oopsie moments, then you're not trying hard enough. And it's all about what you do with the oopsie moments. You know, live a little dangerously. It's just paint and brushes. Okay, I think from there, I think I have a good transition going on everywhere. And now we'll pick up our gloves and our sea sponge while everything is still wet. And then we'll get our sponge wet in that back compartment of my brush basin. Wring it out. If you can't wring it out because of hand strength or something like that, then you just can, oh, don't do that over your palette or over your painting. You can stand on your sponge with your foot and the sponge between a paper towel, and that makes a really excellent foot-pounds of pressure there to clean the brush off. Well, the sponge off. Okay, we're going to get out Desert Turquoise. Put a little bit of that on our palette. And then we want to take our sponge and, I got you on there, not quite. And evenly kind of stipple this. And you know what, I did this when I was painting it on the other piece. I'm just going to use my black mat as my palette right now because it's a big open area, and then I'm not afraid to dance around with that sponge. Now I'm not worried about sending the back of my piece through that either. So, okay, so now I'm going to just stipple that color, and then I'll darken it as I need it, working it around, just giving me a little bit of that turquoisey color through the center of my sky. And you can twist. If you're getting too much of a pattern, give it a little twisty poo. Then I can go into Indian turquoise and just dirty brush or dirty load. And do the final bit through there. Okay, then I got a little pattern going, and I want the pattern. So I'm going to twist I'm definitely standing up. My head's probably been on the camera. Okay, now we let this completely dry, and we're ready to get going. All right, now that I've made my mess, we'll talk about how to clean it up. These are black nonstick mats. You can use epoxy on them. I did an experiment. I think it's on the product page for this product. But I did hot glue gun, so it's good up to like 500 degrees. I did two-part epoxy. I did wood glue, paint, all kinds of stuff. And nothing sticks to this. As a matter of fact, when I tape it down on my table, because I've got two of these mats side by side, when I tape down the bottom, the tape doesn't like to stick to them either. So it can be a little problematic that stuff doesn't stick to them. So what I've got is just a bottle of water. I'm just going to wet this. This is the mess from two projects here, so I haven't cleaned it after I finish the other project. But then I'm going to take out my secret weapon, which is my three-sided squeegee. And it's got a hard side to it, and it's got a little soft side to it. The flexible little squeegee part is really awesome for applying different products. But I'm going to use this hard edge, and I'm just going to do that. And this whole big, giant, long line of paste and gunk will just come right off. So when I wet it with water, and then it'll just get all those little dots and dings and pieces of varnish and all that stuff off of there. Okay, and then I'll just dry everything off. And what I like about this is it allows me to keep my table clean, but I can still do something silly like make it a palette like I just did. You know, I don't have to worry about anything getting on it that won't come off later, because everything comes off later. The only thing you can't do with this is you can't cut on it, which I almost made the mistake of doing because I was so comfortable with it. I was thinking that it was a cutting mat because it's a dark color, not thinking in my clear brain there. So this right here is that varnish that I had out earlier, and it's just wiping off with my fingertip pressure. Okay, I've got my piece, and it is still wet, and the reason it is still wet is because I use the drying time extender, and so it'll be sticky kind of wet for a little while. That's not a problem. You can force this dry, so that's great, and then hurry things up that way. But I wanted to share, this is Glad Press and Seal. And if you are concerned, maybe you have a four-season piece that you don't want to get mucked up on the back side. If you're concerned with the back of your surface, what you can do, this is a really excellent tip, is you could take some of your press and seal. You can lay it around your back. Don't pull it out too much bigger than your surface. But you can seal that directly to that piece, okay? And then you've got a barrier for your painted piece so that you don't run it through paint and get it destroyed and yucky. Okay, so really awesome tip. This press and seal, keep a tube of it in your paint cart, and then you also can keep your 12-inch roll of yellow tracing paper in there when you are done with the press and seal itself. So it just fits right on there, and then it's a great dispenser. Alright, while I've got my stuff waiting to dry, I want to show you the powers of the brush cleaner and restorer. Whoops. Besides the fact that it doesn't pour very nicely out of this jar. This is an amazing product, super duper safe. You'll hear me talking about it a lot, but that's because it is amazing and everybody needs some. And if you want to give a gift to somebody who has a hard time with their brushes, perfect gift. This is a groomer. It's not as handy for the round brushes as it is for the flat brushes. But watch what happens. This is a dry brush with a big crusty bunch of dark paint in it. I'm just going to dip this brush in this, and you should start seeing the very dry, crusty paint come out of there. Okay, tease it out just a little bit. Okay, and we see that we're getting this kind of brownish muck. Very, very hardened paint. But I see it's getting less and less. What's really fun when you work on some of these brushes, okay, getting there. Sometimes, This is what you got to do, is just tease it out. So I'm rubbing the ferrule. I don't want to rub so hard as to break the hairs off, but I've got to eke out that nasty stuff I've allowed to dry in there. Okay, and I can see that I've got much less of an area. Now what I can do if I want to, because I haven't got this out yet, what I can do is I can make a little foil packet out of this and just lay it off to the side and let it soak overnight, and it will clean out very easily with water. You can just wash it in water. Okay, let's take a look. Yeah, I've still got some stuff, but see, now it's chipping out with my fingers. Alright, the brushes that these really help you with are these ones that you have to use dry. You go in there, you can almost start seeing the colors of paint releasing. Like maybe I scumbled with green, and before that I used red. It'll come off in layers. You can then chisel this off on the groomer. Okay, and then that softens your brushes back up, and this is an expensive brush. They're brilliant brushes, but you don't want to waste them. But you need to use them dry. I mean, that's why it's dry rubbing. Okay, and then I'll just rinse that. And now my brush that was hard is now very flexible. Don't worry about the staining on the brush. That's just the pigment or the dye in the pigment. Okay, I've got the beautiful bentwood box, and I've got a little bit of a conundrum because this pattern is bigger than the wood piece that I'm going to go on. So an easy way to do that is to go ahead and measure. So I've got a flexible ruler. I know I don't need all these trailing trees and stuff like that, so I can cut my scene off pretty straight and make it into a nice little square. And I'm going to end up making it into a nice little rectangle is what I'm actually going to end up doing. So I'm going to go from here to here, and we're going to say that that is 10 inches. Okay. So I will take my sizing dial, and the original size goes in here, and so I'll find my 10 inches, which is right here, and then I know that I'm going to go down in size to this size right here, and you can see it really kind of almost could fit. It's just going to not give me that white area that I want. Okay, and then I've got a 10-inch board. That's really funny. Okay, but I'm definitely going to want it to fit within maybe about 9 inches of space. So what I'll do is I'll line up my 9 inches on the outer dial, 10 and a 9. Your reduction size is on the bottom, so I'm going to go, percentage of original size, I'm going to go 90% of the original, so I'm going to shrink it down 10%, right? So I will go get my patterns done, and then I will trace them. Okay, as I've reduced my pattern, I'm going to move and shift the center of interest over just a little bit. I really have this church pretty close to the center of my building, and I've got Santa's sleigh. He's way over here, and he needs to be more towards the middle just to jockey this around. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up with the bottom and then trace my scene in here, and that will give me the ability to slide Santa Claus over, but yet not have him running off the edge of the thing, because I do like the moon and I want to make room for that moon. So, and I may even go ahead and make the Santa sleigh just slightly smaller to be able to give myself a little room to jockey it over as well. Okay, what I've done is I've moved Santa Claus over, so he's not way over to this side. I've moved him over. You can see that there's the layover with the church, and he's in a couple inches. I moved him over as far as I could for Rudolph here. And then I moved the moon in, so that it's just going over Santa. So it's a really quick little simple adjustment to make this fit on my square surface versus having it on a rectangle. Another thing that I've done is I have simplified my trees into V shapes, and I probably will ignore most of them. And I trace my drawing from my original piece, not from my drawing that I intend to paint. And then what I also have done is I have traced the reindeer with only their horns, and I did put the little jingle, the harness thing on the lead reindeer here, but When I was painting the other piece, I had a hard time deciphering the forest for the trees. I couldn't figure out where the reindeer ended, where the reins ended, where all that stuff ended. So I went ahead and traced them this way, and then what I'll do is as soon as I'm done painting them, as soon as I've traced them on my piece, I will go ahead and go back and trace the next pieces to them, being the harnesses and the reins and things like that, and that way I can see what's going on. The other thing that I did is some of these elements, let's get you in here, some of these elements here, like the lantern, our tendency is to paint, we'll be painting along and then we'll go around this stuff. What I've gone ahead and done is sketched the pattern basically whole, and I've left out Santa Claus, I've left out the toys, I've left out the sack, I've left out everything else, because that's going to make all of this trim work and my sleigh go way faster, and I'm not going to need to worry about stuff being in the way. And then I'll paint those items on top or into, and that will make it easier. And then the other thing I have also done is left off any detail on my gold trim work, and I will put that on after I get it base coated, just to make things easier. One thing about painting something first one way and then repainting it is it gives you an idea of where you found struggles, and so why not work around them. As I'm getting ready to trace, I will simply, this pattern is actually simple enough once I take out all the complicated elements. So I'm not going to tape it down. I'm going to do this section, then this section, and this section. Notice that I have my line drawn on my edge. That lines up exactly with the border of my piece so that it will stay on there straight. It's easy to track. I'm going to use the Triple Threat Ghostwriter. This has got a roller ball here in the nose that doesn't have any ink. So it's like a ballpoint pen without any ink in it. And what that means is you get a very flowing line versus just dragging a metal ball across your surface. What this also means is that, the other thing I love is the padded grip. So I do a death grip on my stylus, and this has got a wide grip and it's padded, so it makes tracing super, super simple and very comfortable. Okay, I'm going to do a cool little thing with this. Let's get you in a little closer. Let's take advantage of the fact that I don't normally paint things after I've already painted them. When I went at this piece to paint it, this blue is so electric. I was very, very nervous about doing what I had planned on doing. And I wasn't sure that I could settle down the blue to make everything be charming and wonderful. Okay, so I went about it just kind of placing important colors where I thought the important colors were going to go. And now that I'm repainting it, I can go at it in a more methodical way. So what we're going to do, the gold is placed over the green of the sled. So I'm going to paint the green of the sled before I paint the gold. And we'll finish that sled with all of its shading so I don't have to go around any of these elements. It's going to make life much easier. Then we'll paint the gold on, and we'll paint the inside of the Santa sled and all that kind of stuff. And we'll just work our way through it. And actually what we should do is go one step further. Let's go ahead and get that moon on there right now. Alright, the very first thing we'll do is we'll switch to a larger brush. I'm going to go into slate gray, then gray sky, then whitewash, and that'll be in your pattern packet. And I'm just going to go ahead and get that moon based. I want it kind of loosely based. I want my corners or my edges round. I'm just going to go ahead and march right over the top of my sled. I am, however, not going to round it out all the way. And I'll just retrace those lines on. You could very easily... Okay, this is going to drive me crazy. Hang on. Alright, I've gone ahead and gotten the Artist Buddy out because this is one of those projects where in order to get to my reindeer antlers, I'm going to want to swing this around quite a bit to get the roundness of the moon, to get a good angle on the rails down here. Everything seems to need an upside down angle, which is one of the reasons I decided not to film the box hole, because swinging that box around would have driven you guys all crazy. So the Artist Buddy has, normally what I would be doing with the Artist Buddy is I would be using it in its upright position, and I would be using this little locking down mechanism and these brackets to adjust it to a height. What this does for you is this gets you upright. And so see how it holds my piece, and I don't have to worry about it. So my piece is secure on there because of this rubberized mat.
This gives me excellent posture, so if you've ever experienced any kind of back problems, shoulder pains, things like that from painting for long hours, this little gem right here is going to save your bacon. And then this little device right here is a very low-tech lock. Okay, so that makes it so that this will not budge. So when you know you want to paint at this angle and get in there, your face is at a better angle. The other thing this does, and this I didn't know this, somebody else had to explain it to me. What this also does is it helps you with your perspective and your shading and getting the colors right, because when your piece is flat, your eye has to travel a greater distance to the back. And so when your piece is upright, your eye sees everything at the same amount of distance. And so that helps you with your perspective, and it also helps you with, that's why drafting tables are up. Who knew? So I knew there was a reason, I just didn't know what the reason was. But so this helps you get your colors right, so as things are fading away, you're going to know that you're making critical decisions that are right and not just on some kind of trick of the eye kind of thing. So since I know that I'm going to have to be flipping this, I'm going to go ahead and lay it down flat, even though that's less comfortable for me, but then you won't be, you'll get that good angle. We've got this new downward angle filming, and that makes it so that you can see things at the right undistorted viewpoint. So we'll go ahead and make our moon. And notice that when I base coat, I don't base coat right to the edge when I first have that wad of paint on my brush. I start in from the edge and kind of take care of that first. Then I'll go in there and I'll start in the same spot, smooth it out, and then as soon as I don't think I have too much paint wadded on there, I'll go and make it be the round, because then I won't be leaving ridges. Okay, and we're just going to get that sort of base coated evenly. I don't want these big blue lines, so I'll just go take care of those now. Now, we'll paint this as if I was painting this in a class. Obviously, I wouldn't send all 25 of you in my class off to the blow dryers at the same time. That would be silly. And it causes disruption and, you know, distraction and all that kind of stuff. So what we will do is we'll do something else while we're waiting for that moon to dry. And so the perfect thing to do while we're waiting for the moon to dry is to base coat our little deer. Okay, the deer are going to be base coated, and I think I've got the wrong color, honey brown. And when you're setting up your palette, one of the things that I like to do is set things up in this kind of system. And I'll show you the difference between the palette that I would paint intentionally at and my other palette. This is the palette from the actual piece. And that is as random as possible. Although I do have my greens clustered and my browns clustered, the rest of it is, it looks like Chinese firecrackers. So when you're painting, if you are going about it methodically, and when I write my packets, I try to write them in a more methodical fashion. So lay your colors out all together so that you know that that's my shadow, that's my base coat, that's my highlight, or that's my base highlight, more highlight in this case. And I'm not going to say that I always do that right, but, and I've almost talked my moon dry. So what I'm going to do is start with my little farthest away reindeer dude, okay, and he is just super stinking difficult to see because he's a little dinky squat guy, and we're just going to base him the round brush and our honey brown, and we're just going to go ahead and base coat him. I'm making liner lines for the legs, not worrying about giving him too much form. Okay, and his antlers will do next, but first what I want you to do is go ahead and get all of your deer base coated using the little round brush. As you get up here, you might get into a bigger round brush, but it really is just a matter of base coat without a big juicy brush, follow your lines, okay, and just get them all based on while your moon is drying. Alright, I've got the reindeer on there. And they've just got a couple little quick base coats. Make sure I keep you on camera here. hardest thing in the world to do is to keep your project centered underneath a camera if you have to move it. And unfortunately, I can't paint from one angle only. All right, so here we go. So next we're going to take, this is dry rubbing. Some people call this dry brushing. Dry brushing is, in my vernacular, is the look of dried scratchy paint. This is using a dry brush with dry paint and drying it off on your towel, okay? And it's a rub, 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 rub. It has not so much to do with the texture of the brush. Okay, so this is a crescent brush. I'm going to go into this light gray sky blue, gray sky with my dry brush, dry paint, dry paper towel. Okay, and I'm going to rub it mostly off. Then I'm going to come over here. You can almost do this technique with your eyes shut. And you're just going to rub. You're going to use shape following strokes. Okay, and you're going to build it up. Sometimes things show right away, so you want to kind of tiptoe into it. Obviously, this isn't the case with this color here. And my moon can be slightly irregular. Okay, so this is one of those times when I'm going to get rid of the Artist Buddy just because it's making all the crackety-crackety noise. And I don't want to be super distracting. So we're just going to pretend like this sleigh isn't there. We'll make it lightest in the middle. Okay, see how that's making a nice rounded shaped moon. And I just keep loading and finding a dry spot on my paper towel. This is a very paper towel intensive technique. Make sure I'm dry. If there's any wet spot on here, this is going to catch and then you will be very sad. Sad things happen. Okay, and just keep rubbing. My angle of my brush is upright. And now I'm going to do the scary thing. I'm going to go outside of my lines just a little bit here. Dry off my brush. Now this is going to show more because it's going to be on the darker blue. And so I'm misting just lighter pressure. Our moon is definitely glowing. And I see a very big mistake that I have here that I need to fix right away. And that is, anytime that even if you dry scumble over the top of these little graphite lines that I have here, then they're going to be sunk under there forever and you're going to be able to see them. And so far I've just got a little mist. Let's see if I can get that off. Yay. But if I put any more than that, I would have my wonky little graphite line trapped in my project forever and it just takes away. And I was going to tell you to go ahead and address your reindeer. This is a micro eraser. Look at how fantastically tiny that tip is. I mean, compared to even, you know, like my thumbnail there. This gets you right in where you need to be. You're not screwing around with the rest of your piece. If you've got paint that's wet, you can just move around it. It is fantastic. It's minimalized on the amount of eraser scumbles that fall off. It is amazing. It has refills. It clicks down so you can go short or long. Okay, and they have been one of the hottest sellers on our website since we brought them in. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase all of those details, not the antlers yet, but I just don't want to get myself in a position where I forget to take off the graphite lines. So we're going to go back to our moon right now. I've got my graphite lines mostly gone. I'll re-dip, talk to my brush dry, and then I'll continue with my moon glow. I'm going to bring it right over the top of my rail. Now that's going to mean that that little rail of my sleigh gets trapped in there forever too. Can bring it around towards the tail of the reindeer. Make sure we get right on top of the edge of the moon. It really shouldn't have like a dark halo. And really loosify it You don't want it to be super duper tight moon glow. It's doing that moon type thing up there in that sky. It's not going to be perfectly round. Next thing we'll do is we'll go into some of our white. This is going to probably feel like a really big jump. And this is also one of those things where you're going to sit down and you're going to adjust your colors at the end. You don't just put colors down and say, okay, that's what she said to do, I'm done. You're going to take it and you're going to look at it in comparison with your painting. Some people lean towards very strong, bold colors. Some people are heavy-handed. Some people are light-handed. Some people might have to float 15 times to achieve what a heavy-handed person would achieve in one float. And none of those techniques is wrong. So you just have to kind of compensate for yourself. Okay, so we bring that out and we decide if we're liking it or not. I think we could use a little bit more. And I tend to shy away from getting there all the way. I want to get mostly there and then adjust at the end, which then I have to work around the elements and the pieces, but oh well. Okay, bring a little bit of white out there, just near the edge. Maybe so. Much nicer to paint over that sled and not have to worry about working around it though. And now I think we'll go with some stronger, heavier, almost like a more slip-slappy texture. I didn't dry it off very much on my brush. That's just really going to back glow Santa and his toys. Okay, see how that gave us a little bit of moon texture right there? And do I want to do it one more time? I think I do. A little bit more texture in there. Okay, and so now we have a moon. Yay. And then we'll do some more with it, of course, as we get finished. I'm going to go ahead and trace my reindeer effects back on. I don't know where one reindeer ends and the other reindeers don't. Actually, you know what? I'm going to second guess myself. We're going to go ahead and paint the antlers on, and then we'll trace on the noses and the rumps and the legs and things like that, so we know where to shade. Okay, I'm just going to use my little round brush. I've got the number 1 stroke brush, easy stroke brush. This one has a finer line to it than a lot of other rounds. So I'm just going to go ahead and just fill in and try to make as graceful as possible lines using Espresso, and try not to make anything look too awkward. These are just appearances of our antlers. Don't worry about making realistic looking antlers. They're in the night sky. They're going to get a little highlight. They're going to be a little subdued. It'll be fine. I'm going to use my little micro eraser, and I'm going to go get all the extra fluffy little lines off of there, and then I'll put on the detail lines. I'll trace on all those little detail lines. Okay. Alright, as I've got my lines erased, things traced back on up here, I'm going to get ready to shade up there, but I want something to dry down here while I'm working on the area up there. And I've got a really cool trick I want to show you. First thing we're going to do is we're going to stipple on our background trees. That's what I want to dry. So I've got some of my evergreen color, but see how that's very brilliant green? Back trees won't be that dark. So we're going to mix evergreen and that and make it kind of blend a little bit with its background. I've got an angle stippler brush, which is a very rough brush, and if yours isn't open, you need to open it. Okay, if it's not kind of open and scumbly like that, then you are toast and it will not work well. And then I'll load very wet watery paint into the toe, and then I'm just going to go ahead and make kind of a band. I don't know if you can see my white lines. Yeah, they're there. A band of trees. Okay, and I want to make sure I'm very wet, not wet enough. See how that's very, very stiff looking? So I'll load both colors, really put out some paint. I'm blotting just a little bit on my paper towels. And then I want to make some tree shapes. Up and over, roof lines. Don't line them up, like I just went directly over that line of that tree, and that's not cool. Some are short, some are tall. Make sure you're going upright. Make sure you've got them going to the top. The toe of my brush is aiming towards the sky, and then I'm going to get a little bit bigger over here. A little bit more water. Oops, too stiff. So I really want those, see how they're fading and drawing out so you can barely see them? That's what we want. I'm not worried about anything else. It's going to be one more layer of goods. Maybe I'll put a little bit darker and do a couple of extra shorter layers. Okay, that just gives us some depth over the treetops. Now, as I'm getting ready to shade, I've now prevented myself from doing anything like shading because I've got a barrier here. That's where this wonderful thing called a bridge comes in handy. Okay, this is an acrylic bridge and it is on little feet. I can set this right over my piece and slide it wherever I want. Where this comes in particularly handy is if you have a tray with a side that you need to get inside of and you can't. Metal trays are fantastic for this. And what this also does for you, and it is amazing, you will not believe when you try it. When you're lining, let me get a liner brush out. They're all laying over here. I'm going to find something. Okay. Got my Raphael liner out, right? Normally when you line, when I line, I have only so much space that I can lift my hand. Okay, I have a good inch of space, and what that means is when I go down on the downstroke and I want to stroke and gracefully lift off, that leaves me with a very short window of stroke possibility. But when I lift myself up by an inch, that gives me the ability to reach out, press down, lift up, and finish my stroke with a much bigger range of movement because I've lifted myself off. By having an acrylic one of these, I can still see my colors through, which is fantastic, but the edges are nice and smooth, and it gives me a very wide, very smooth, so I don't chafe my wrist. I could also move this and I could anchor it so that my arm is resting on it in this way. So it could also become a brace for your arm if you have problems in that way. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And it comes long enough to go over most sized projects. So now that I've got my wet area down here, we're going to float on our reindeer's bottoms. Okay, and so the reindeer are going to get a milk chocolate float. And I'm using an angle brush. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and notice I'm going to chisel my brush towards the back end of this reindeer. Oops, and notice that I'm going to go sliding. Okay, now I've got that little blurble right there that I just biffed off the back of my reindeer. I'm just going to lick the tip of my micro eraser, and that will erase that paint right off. What's really cool about this kind of eraser is if you wet it and the paint is fresh, it will erase your paint. If your eraser is dry and if your paint is fresh or old, it will not erase your paint. So, any blurbles are easy to rectify. Okay, so now I'm going to go on here and shade where the legs separate behind things, wherever the one crosses over in the front. And so I'm getting my little tails. I'm going to get in there with my super sharp, cute tip. Just stab myself in the mouth with the cute tip. Load more water as I need to. And then I'm going to, so this guy right here is, his head is in front of his rump. So I'll just glide along and take that right up around his ears. and then shade his little rumpy. And that gives him the effect that he is in front of him. Get you in a little bit closer. His nose is on top of this other guy's chest, or in front of. Okay. Hurrah, sorry. Okay, this guy's little nosy poo is in front of this guy's body. This little tail is in front. I'm just using the tip of my brush. Now that just gives that little bit of illusion that it is in front. And that is what we are after. And then the ones that aren't, like Rudolph up here in the front, if he's not Rudolph, that's okay. Maybe you can't see Rudolph because he's leading the trail and he's faded out. He just gets just that ever so much, a little bit of some other color going on. He'll get a little highlight as well. So then you'll go in and do rumps. Everybody's rump gets a little shade, a little cleanup. Back leg action there. Have to wait to do that other one. This little ear back here just gets darkened. Oh, and then this guy is in front of that guy. And he could be all the way shaded, just to give the impression that there's another thing up there happening. Okay, and now that's dry. Over that. Okay, see how they start taking a little bit of form. We'll shade under his tail back here, under his leg. I'll just keep reloading my paint. These are fairly dry floats because you want to stay in control. And some of it's almost liney, like this one I'm doing right now is just really a little line, and I'll soften that with the edge of my Q-tip. And then he's got this little belly, his legs in front of his belly. Okay, so we've got most of that. I'll just check for any missing detail dudes, and then we'll start highlighting. Alright, I'm going to get rid of any lines that are going to be in my way and determine if I've missed anything at all, and then I'll highlight. The nice thing about small, like I really don't paint small very often, not really tiny anyway, but the nice thing about small is the details are so tiny you don't really have to struggle with accuracy because the viewer will not be able to see it. In some cases. Now that is obviously not true in every case, but in many cases that is a true statement, and it makes for very forgiving painting. Like you can't tell what's happening with the reindeer's antlers up front, you just get the impression that they are indeed antlers. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to give all the little tails highlights. Okay, and this is with Cocoa. Okay, his tail seems to be missing, but we'll just float it in. And his back rump maybe needs that little highlight as well. Okay, his little ears get to be highlighted. Same with the rest of the little ears. And that's really almost just a touchdown. Okay, just give him a little ear, just a little touchdown. Okay, same thing here. Does he have a front ear? No. Okay, then we'll flip him around and we'll look for areas that need to be highlighted back here, like the fore part of the leg. Okay, the other fore part of this leg.
Very dry floats when you get small like this. Okay, this little guy right here, I'm trying to figure out what is even happening with that. He's got, aha, he goes in front of his back leg and tail, actually. So we'll just highlight there. And we'll flip him around. And we'll highlight little tails. Whoops. Grab our Q-tip. Nice thing about the Q-tips is you can actually use them for the whole project. You don't have to worry about them wearing out because they just are really, really tightly woven and they just last and last and last. Okay. Looking for highlighting opportunities here. I think I'm going to have to go up to the camel color to get the brightness of highlight that I want. Now as we get up towards the lead reindeer, you're not going to highlight as much, so we want to keep any brighter highlights maybe back, and see that was, yeah, it's a little bit strong. So I'll blend that down in my brush a little bit, but I'll bring that highlight up and maybe on his ears. Okay. He's a pretty close reindeer, so he can have pretty bright ears. These guys right here are going to have a fairly bright little tail. And on this back leg, that just gives some definition. You could line a little bit with these if you wanted to. Clean it up the back side of my brush. Okay, we've got little reindeers. Alright, I'm going to move over to my sleigh and I'm going to go ahead and base coat this with Evergreen. The reason for base coating it with such a dark color is because the light color scared the tar out of me. But as I'm looking at the result, what I end up not having to do is I don't have to spend as much time shading. And shading is the thing that lots of people don't like to do. So by base coating it the darker color, what I could do is I can actually dry rub and make my highlights, which dry rubbing is the thing that you can do with your eyes closed. So that makes it a very, very, very user-friendly technique. So I'll go ahead, if you ever have a choice to base in a darker color, that would be a really good reason to base darker. Alright, so I'm going right over the gold so that I can just go at random and not have to worry about working around elements. How come nobody ever teaches this stuff? It took me like 20 years to learn this stuff. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just squibble in a little bit of this dark green inside the sleigh, even though it's not really, really base coated that color. I just want to give that impression. I'm going to leave a line there. I don't want Santa sitting on the blue sky, so we'll just give it that impression. And then when he sits in there, I won't have to worry about missing anything. And I'll have to give it another base coat. Before I get ready to paint any of my trees down here, I want to go ahead and use my Prussian blue and the darker gray, whose color's name is slate gray. Then I'm going to mix a dark gray blue that's a little bit more dead than the blue that we've got on the piece. Okay, and I want it darker in the shadowy areas where the moon isn't shining, and I can go in and shadow that actually. And the roofs are going to be different colors, so a bit darker. And this is just to mark this all out so that when I do paint my trees and my foreground and stuff, I won't have to lose my buildings. I could have saved myself a step maybe and not base coated them yet, but I didn't, and so this is what I'm going to do to prevent. And I can tint these darker or lighter depending on what I'm doing, and this is just marking their spots. So I'll do their roofs and the walls. I'm working around the trees, not caring about, not caring too much about being real fussy with this. These are very moon glow kind of houses. If it drives you crazy, you can certainly take a little bit more time. That's not a problem. Okay, I've got a little one back there now. I'm going to have my, I think we'll go with just plain slate gray roofs. Oops, and I forgot my belfry up there. Just get a line. So all slate gray roofs, and give yourself a slight tint darker for the chimneys and just base coat away. Alright, we're going to go ahead and dry rub the sleigh. Get you in close enough to see. We're going to leave this alone. We'll probably just shade that. We use the same dry rubbing technique that we used before. We're going to go into Forest Green. And there's a high point right here where this lantern is going to be. And it's supposed to, it was drawn with a division, like a line where the seam of the sled goes, but I have decided that I don't like that. So I took it away. I'm not going to take it all the way to my edge. Just going to dry rub to give shape and form, so I'm giving that big circle-y spot there. And I'll draw it along the front. So, and you can barely see it. This almost could be a mistake color, but let me show you why I chose this color. Here is our evergreen color, and then that is the next color. And notice that it skips down by 2 values. The next color in a row is this very vivid green. If I don't have this bridging the gap of this when I'm dry rubbing, this is going to scream on top of this. So without this to bridge, I'm going to have a big problem. And so then the next jump is this lighter, and then you can see that those 2 colors get along nicely. So sometimes our bridges don't show so much, but if you take them out, then you fall into the river, right? That's what bridges are for. So that's going to help us get across from that dark color to that light color nicely. Okay, and then dirty brush. I'll dip my brush into that next dangerous color. The dirty brush will also help be a bridge because it has a little bit of the darker color in it. Now I do want to be careful that I'm not wet here. I used a generous amount of paint because of course it wasn't showing very much. You always start this technique in the brightest area, and you know what, I feel like it's tacking. It doesn't feel wet, it's not cold, but it feels like it wants to pull. So I'm going to go ahead and blow dry it for a minute, and that will cure it, and I can move on. Okay, I've got dried sled here. We'll brighten our colors. Remember, it's going to be the brightest underneath where that lantern is going to be, and then up the side where the light is shining, where it's raised. And just keep reloading as you need it. Okay, on that back side, it'll be the darkest. That's where the moon is shining in front, which makes the back of that sled look very dark, so don't get too crazy with your highlights back there. Okay, and I can see a little bit of shape happening here. This is much more relaxing than trying to shade all those shape-following floats on there. And then that's sticky, so I'll hit it with a blow dryer again. I'll go ahead and sometimes if I want color in a certain spot, I can just stipple it. Okay, and then when you get a little dot that comes off like that, I think I have to let that cool down just a little bit. I think it's time to dirty brush into the next lighter color, which is bright green. I think that's aptly named. Okay, and then that's going to sit within that color, the brightest other color. You don't want to take that green outside of the realm of what you've done already. Start seeing shape forming stuff happening. Okay, I think that's pretty nice and bright. Now we'll get out our marigold color. And I want to lay this over, let's see, am I done with this brush? If you get these brushes wet, one thing that you will need is a set of these brushes, because if you get them wet, they stay wet for quite some time. And there's the idea that you can wipe off the paint with an alcohol, like a hand sanitizer. But the problem is I get so much paint in my brush that I can't do that technique. So I just wash them out, and then I can clean, get just a dry brush when I need the next one. We do want to go ahead and shade just slightly while we have all of our greens out. We'll shade with the darkest green. Let's see if I can burp out a little bit of that dried paint. Oh, no, that's our base coat color. So we're going to shade with lamp black or black green. Here. See if we can see the black green color. I'm going to shade where Santa sits in his sled. Remember that he's not going to cover that whole area, but we just want it to look like something's happening there. Okay. And we'll shade as that comes around the back corner. We'll shade that nice and round. And reduce it to the front. And then we want to shade right underneath our gold trim. Round that around the back. Okay, and that gives us just a little bit more depth. And we can shade that back side over there. Alright, I think our sleigh is good to go. Now it's time to go ahead and base coat all of the trim. And it is base coated in honey brown. Next we're going to start shading our gold trim. We're going to use Espresso. And we're going to shade it down pretty significantly now. Notice in this area I'm using the toe of the brush and I'm doing what is called walking my float down. And what this is going to do for me, the back side of the brush is actually pre-wetting the surface where I'm going to float next, and so it allows the color to float across the wetted area. And what that means is the float will be pretty even though it didn't start off right there, so I can walk it into the floating area. Now I want to tuck some of this color in here using the chisel and flipping my brush around. I want a fairly liquidy float on this. I don't want any harsh lines. Okay, we're going to come over here. And I don't like a wet ferrule, and I keep getting my ferrule wet. I think I'm going to have to squirt. I don't know if you've seen the water drop trick, but if you take your water bottle, which is here, and you squirt, it makes different sizes of water drops, and if I keep squirting, some of them will get very large. Okay, then what I can do is with the clean end of my brush, it just sucks up a little bit of water, and I can continue floating rather than dipping my whole brush into my water basin, which is giving me fits right now. So, alright, so I'll come over here and then float, and that's much easier. And I can reload water and paint from the same location, just really making it simpler. Okay, Okay, so then we'll float down. Choppy little floats and Q-tip. Normally I really only use one of these per project. I generally will throw them away after one project though. They kind of harden and they become little scrubbers, which is really nice. So that's for any of those little areas that just want to float out of control. For your float to work, you really do have to have your whole brush lying on the surface. And I could switch to a smaller brush, but I'm happier just cleaning up my mess than trying to worry about perfecting my float. And don't get me wrong, this is a perfect float because that's how I intend it to be. Like I know what the result is going to be. So like right now I just colored over that whole blue area. Not a problem because I know either my eraser or my Q-tip will take it away. And then I'm laying down just a little bit too much for that job, but I'm just trying to nudge that color in there. Okay, and then let's see what else we've got here. These guys right here we'll need. That back side will get a little bit shaded as this comes around. Shade here, shade down here. I'm not sure that I'm shading where things should be shaded as far as by any rules. And I don't apologize for that because I do it by look, and I think that's what makes it folk art. But if you are a person that cares, feel free to figure it out, and then you can even let me know. Okay, and then our runner gets a little bit of this is the top of the edge of the runner thing going on here. Okay, and do we need maybe just a little bit more? Boy, the water drops are sure a big time saver. Just helps so much to have them right where you need them, exactly the right size. To make it just slightly warmer, I'm going to use just a little bit of Alizarin Crimson, just to warm up those little gold thingies, whatever that is, whatever that stuff's called, I'm not sure. But that'll carry my color through, and it also just adds kind of some depth. We'll take a little bit of soft black, which has also got some warmth to it, and we'll add the depth with that soft black just to deepen underneath. It's deeply dark back here. Don't use the red where you don't want anything happening, like no distractions. You want to use the red where attention will be paid. Okay, next we will, I think we'll go ahead and trace on. Oh, I'm going to do the one highlight for
underneath the lamp, but I wanted to make sure the lamp was in the right place. So I think now might be a really good time to trace my lamp. Alright, because I want to make my lantern go where I want it to go before I trace the pattern on, I'm just going to use the triple thread, and the reason it's called triple, it should be quadruple, and I'll tell you why. It has a white ceramic lead, a gray ceramic lead, the roller ball without any ink, and an eraser on board. So, fantastic little tool, one size fits all. So I'm going to go to the white, click it down, and then I'm just going to reach under here and make a little line that will say, hey, that's where I want you to put the glow. Now the reason I want to put that line there is that marker, that ceramic lead, will erase with spit, water, varnish, eraser, everything. So as I'm putting the glow on there, I don't have to worry about it being in the wrong place or having a mark that will be there forever. So I'm going to go ahead and get the yellow color, which is the mustard seed, and I'm going to make lovely yellow glow right where I want it to be. You'll reinforce it and make it stronger where the lamp is the most at, and we could add some more once we get the lamp on there. We could stipple just a little bit, and we can bring it down over here. Our night sky. Who's saying how bright this lamp's going to be? Okay, I think that gives us a good enough glow to go ahead and base coat the lamp, and then I'm not painting over my base coat over my, I'm not glowing over my base coats and then having to redo base coats. But while we have this color out, we'll go ahead and we'll load that, and we'll have some trim color come along. And go ahead and make that glow there. Give it a glow on the back side. Let it glow, let it glow, let it glow. Okay, every now and again, I know. And then we'll give some glow up here. This is almost like a dry brush. I've got it a little too juicy to really be a dry brush, but it's giving me the scratchy look. It's giving me a highlight. I'm not floating, but it fades because of the scratchiness, so I don't have to have a perfect little float. So whoever's pointed at the gold glow, in theory, would be who gets the gold glow on the painting. And we can just kiss a little bit of that in most places. We can go into the camel color for the areas that aren't gold glowish and that just need a highlight. And that'll just be whiter and not so yellow. Yellow is warm, and so it's going to get your eye. There we go. Isn't it nice to have that trim all done before we start tossing lanterns and things like that on it? Alright, I've decided I want to give my little reindeer a go with the soft black just to deepen them just a little bit, and I'll just do the very chiselly edge of my brush because I don't want them to become purple reindeer. But I think they could just use that little bit of additional depth. They're a little nondescript right now. Okay, so we'll just go in and in all of the shadow areas, especially where they're more prominent reindeer, then you'll deepen them just a little bit. On that same note, we're going to shade the antlers at the base with a little bit of the soft black. And that will give them just a little bit of depth. A little bit more than that.
Just anchors them on their little heads better. Don't run through their ears. So on these back ones, you might want to be a little bit careful about who's in front of whom. That way you can add the right amount of depth. Okay, and then we just need a little highlight on them as well. And so we're going to find our round brush. And we'll use just a little bit, I think, of the cocoa. And just almost do like a little C-stroke, little strokey stroke right there. Shape following, almost a little rose mulling-esque, and that'll give them just a little bit of highlight and should be the right amount. On the antlers that are to the front, you could take just a little bit of the camel and highlight just the ones to the front. And that will kind of help differentiate those deer from, oops, that's a back one. So maybe these guys are getting a little bit of the light of the moon, kind of. Maybe that's how we'll do it. If they're getting a little bit of that light of the moon, then highlight them as they're going away from the moon, and that gives us that illusion that they're leaving the area. And you could increase their little ear highlights. Give them a little bit more of a tail. And I think it's time to give them their eye. We'll call them their little selves done here. So we'll go into, let's go ahead and go into the soft black. And the eyeball is going to be just the simplest little thing. It's just going to kind of be a little dash. Using soft black, something dark enough to show up. And then we've got to give them little noses where they have noses. Just a little bit too much water in my brush. Okay, we could give a little red glow up there, but I think it would be distracting. So I think we'll just stick with and don't you guys be telling Rudolph that I told you that his nose was distracting. We could also line just a little bit to differentiate these guys, giving the soft black kind of detailed line where we wanted the shading to increase, but maybe it was a little bit intimidating to float. You could line it instead and it would kind of give you the same technique, the same look. Right, I think we are good with those. Now I'm going to trace on my Santa. Oh, no, and my, all my harnessy stuff and all that kind of stuff as well. I'm going to switch to a slightly larger sized brush, and I'm going to base all of the red in this sleigh area and the harnesses with country red. And that is just going to be liner brush base coating, very simple. Make sure that you're flattening your brush out so that you don't get ridges. If you're getting ridges, you have too much paint and you haven't flattened your brush into a flat. Let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so here is my red. When I load this brush, I don't poke it into the middle so I end up with a great big blob of paint. What I do is I flatten it in my paint, and that way I have a juicy amount and I get a nice ridgeless flat base coating brush. Okay, and then that allows me to store a little bit of extra paint, and I get a lot of control because I can chisel. So I can chisel, I can calligraphy, I can fat, and I can press, plus I can stroke. Now you don't get this amount of detail with every brush. This is, I have a couple of favorite rounds, and they're the Pro Round and the Easy Stroke, and they are the best rounds I have ever met in my life. They just always do a good job. Anybody could do a stroke with these brushes. Now we want to shade our red harnesses,
with Alizarin Crimson first. Ah! My paint is getting to the point where it's been out and it's dried, and I just burped it on my thumbnail, on my fingernail. Okay, so this is going to give us a really deep red look to our little harnesses, and so we're going to walk that in just a little bit. Okay, then we'll do a deeper little soft black plum shade that will deepen it around the corner. So this is really just not even to shade at all, it's almost more of a glaze. And we'll do the rest of the harnesses. Then we'll do the rest of the details that are red on his body over here. Okay, and we'll go this direction. So we'll shade everywhere where it needs to be shaded. First with the crimson color. And then we'll deepen it with the soft black. Okay, and so when you have these long skinny elements, you just walk it out. We'll do the same with the lantern. And we'll do a little bit more of his hat. And I've got all of the little base coats done. Let's see, who else do we need? We need the other side of the lantern. Okay, then we'll do the underside of the harnesses. Just like so. Get out a little bit more black plum. And that's going to be a skinnier float. Okay, so let's pick on this one that's dry over here. And what we'll do is we'll just come across right next to that edge. And then that makes it very deep, very red, and very around the cornered. And on Santa Claus over here, we're going to shade right up next to where the furs go, the edge of our ball. We're going to separate his elbow and all of that stuff. I haven't shaded with the alizarin down here, but I'm not super worried about it because that's going to be a deeply darkly place, and deeply darkly places don't get to shine red. Okay, so like here he's sitting back in. You could take that step and you could do that step, but I'm not going to waste my time. But it won't hurt you to do it. Does that make sense? Wherever things are disappearing are going to be a little darker, a little strongerly dark. Okay, and we go around the sides of the lantern. Alright, we've got to get Santa shaded on either side of his hat, or his hat will not look round. So we'll take just a real skinny float of the black plum, and we'll bring that up. Shade under all of his fur areas, and really from side to side as well. Let's get y'all. I'm trying to get a dry place where I can just drag this down on the chisel and not disrupt the other float. There we go. Okay, where these ribbons are tied at the joint, then we need to shade that and walk it down. We've got a new color we're going to try to highlight red, and so we'll use the really microscopic crescent brush. And this is a really brilliant new red. Let's see how it does. Okay, so we'll try it on our
reindeer harnesses first.
I think it's pretty good. I'm not sure if it's bright enough. Let's try it on his arm. Keep getting hung up on my knots here. I think we're still going to need a little bit. Why don't we mix that color with the mustard seed color and come up with maybe a final little highlight color. Almost be orange, almost not. A bit up the hat here. I'm going to get out another color. I'm not happy with that color so much, and then with the yellow, and it looks orange. So I'm going to try the neons. We'll try the neons to make the red pop. And what they do is they sit on top of that color, and then they absorb kind of in. When they dry, they take on the properties of the color underneath. So we're just going to dry brush using this round. And that gives it a lot more. It's amazing how much nicer that looks. We'll just do all of the red areas the same way. Okay, and I think that gives us a nice luminescence. Now we'll go through and we'll put the jingle bells on with our round brush, and we'll just kind of dab them on. I'm not worried about them being super perfect in size and shape. Let's see, and then we'll do all of these little guys over here on the harnesses. So they're all just cocoa, and they get dabs. And just try to evenly space them out. And they'll get smaller as they go back away from the eye. So make sure that yours are getting smaller and they're not these giant, huge bowling balls by the time we get up there to the lead reindeer. Alright, now we're going to shade each little jingle bell with just a C-stroke of a technique here. I'm going to get my ginormous, huge angle shader here, but all I'm going to do is just shade to the bottom of each jingle bell with a very skinny float. Okay, so you don't need a lot of water, definitely a very dry float, and you don't want to spread the paint across your brush too much or it will not look pretty. It'll take over the whole jingle bell. Okay, and then after we get done doing that, and I need more paint, then we'll line under them with our soft black. Okay, and then that will go right underneath each bell. Underneath that, let's see, a little stronger black, soft black. Right under the C-stroke. And then the final little highlight gets to be mustard seed. And that is way too much paint. And that'll give us a nice deep looking bell. Okay, we're going to use thinned burnt umber and do the reins. And when you're lining like this, now I'm going to be leaning over, hopefully I get my head out of the way. You want to kind of pull towards yourself in shorter strokes. I don't have to make it all the way from here to there in one fell swoop. Okay, and then when we're going from reindeer to reindeer, you got to go from one harness to the other, and it's a little bit loopier. Okay, so we'll just make that, and you can make it a little bit thickish. I'm not liking how my brown is sitting on the blue, not acting like it's very brown. So my values are struggling, and it connects underneath here to the sleigh. So I'm going to probably go ahead and line next to this with a little bit of darker color. So when you can't see something, when something isn't very obvious, it's probably because it's not on camera. Just kidding. But when you can't see something in your painting, like you think that you've done it dark enough or you think that you've done it right, generally speaking, it's going to be like a value problem. Okay. So now I'll take my black, which is laying around here somewhere. I could also highlight. The more detail you give to little intrinsic, little minuscule things, then the more you draw attention to it, and I really don't want a lot of attention drawn to the reindeer harness. So I'm going to do a little bit, oh, and that's way, 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 way dark. Okay, we don't want to do that. So now maybe we'll go into black plum. And we could mix a little bit of black into our color, and that's not showing at all. So a little black plus a little black plum. There we go. That's a color I can like. So just line a little bit right under where you think you need it. Okay, we want to work on Santa's beard and his face. Finish these puppies right here. We're going to shade underneath his hat on the sides of his fur, just to give it that roundness. Whoops. We're using graphite. I'm still using that same angle shader. This is the Clearly Amazing angle shader. Notice that I have painted, let's see, I know I have at least painted the last two projects using only this one brush. This is the size 3/8. Notice I'm not splitting or cracking or doing any of those weird things, and I have been fairly abusive to it. So, excellent, excellent workhorse little brush. Pardon me. I love it when a brush works. Okay. So now let's give his beard just a couple of little curlicues. Just, you know, give it a little bit of, when we stipple on there, it won't be just a straight beard. We'll shade under his mouth and his mustache. And on his fur, on his cuff. We'll take a bigger round brush. Alright, we'll take a bigger round brush and we'll use the base coat color just to stipple on some fur using a bigger round, and then immediately dirty brush go into gray sky and build up. And what I like about doing this wet and wet is that's going to give you a little bit more blending between the two colors. Dirty brush, pick up a little white. The more you stipple, the more fluffy and soft it will look. You could kind of squiggle too if you wanted to. Okay, and now all the fur will be done the same way, like that on his hat and his cuffs. Okay, we're going to shade our teddy bear with milk chocolate. So we'll shade under his head, on his face. This is where we got to go back to our turning artist buddy here. If you don't have a good angle, stuff isn't going to work out. And then I've got to move my paints back so I don't knock everybody over. Okay. And the only thing I don't like about this for on camera is that my piece is not quite square, or I'm off center where I'm painting, and I guess my piece is actually perfectly square. Let's keep going there. I'm knocking over every bottle of paint that I own. Okay, and we need to put a little dark swath through his face. That's where his eyes are going to sit right there. We'll get Camel to highlight. And let's see. Highlight underneath his little chin. Not wet enough. That's what's happening there. His little belly, a little highlight there. Now he's going to be more highlighted where his arm is draped over and he's getting that light from the lantern. I'll highlight him a little bit extra on that side. Get back into our Raphael. And let's do a little bit of the soft black plus lamp black so he's not so deeply dark for his eyes and his nose. So he's just going to get little squashes for his eyes, a little squash, a little nose, tickle tickle. Okay, and then we can give him just a little itty bitty bit of a smile. Okay, and then if you want to, use that same color while it's in your brush and line. Wah, except for not like that. This is where you wet the end of the Q-tip and you take off the yucky line. So what just happened there was my paintbrush was too dry, which is great for scumbling in little eyes, but not so great for lining things. There we go. Okay, so while I have my lamp black out, I'm appearing or seeing that I needed a little bit of a definition on my sleigh. So I'm just going to line like a heavy, thick, thin, thick line right underneath, just to define. I'm liking that just a little bit better. I don't know why it just struck me that I definitely needed something, a little something, something there. We're going to do the same thing on our, the horn is basically the same colors. So you'll shade with the milk chocolate. And I'm going to shade and drag. And flip it around. I'm going to take a little dry brush of Camel back into my Raphael. And just give it a couple little scribbly highlights. Okay, and that's about it for the horn. Okay, we're going to shade the ball with, yes, what is it? Black Plum. Down here, just to squinch it into the bag. And there, he's nice and squinched. And then we'll highlight it with white. And that will just be use the liner and just drag a little highlight right across that turquoise. Okay, and that is as much as we get. You know, yeah, I want a little bit more highlight on the gray. I got a little bit gray. So I'm going to go ahead and just dry brush a little bit of a highlight across the gray. That's better. Alright, we're going to shade, or actually we're going to highlight, because we've already base coated our little mittens in our darkest color, so we really don't need to shade too much. I'll get you turned around here. So we'll just highlight the tips. which gives us the illusion that we've shaded. And then add one more highlight. Okay, and then we're going to do the same with the tree here. And you know, with the tree, I'm going to skip the forest green color. I think it's forest green, because it's just so close. In this case, I don't think I need it. So I'm going to load, instead of doing my liner brush or round brush, I'm just going to load the chisel point of my angle. And I'm going to go into the tree, and I'm just going to lay that down and give myself little tree detailing. And then blob it off, obviously, where. And then I'll go in with the lighter up the middle. Good. And then we need to give it just a couple of little lights. So those are just going to be paint blobs of the colors you have on your palette. So we want some red lights. Pardon me. And then we want some yellow lights. And I don't have yellow out. And that's the mustard seed color. No water when you do this. It's just good to just have just nice, strong little blobby colors. And you could scribble yourself a little star. And so we were debating why Santa would have a tree in his sack, and I feel like it's because in case some poor little child doesn't have a tree, then he's got a tree to put up for that little child. So I think it's just kind of a sweet little touch. Okay, we've got one last detail on his sleigh, and we are all done. And that is, we've got to get this bag detailed out. So what we're going to do is we're going to shade first with the black plum. Okay, so we want to shade to act like the bag is. We've got a little foldy poo thing on the bag, so let's go ahead and shade that in. And then right next to that shadow we'll highlight. We'll highlight with the camel color. The camel color might be a little bit shocking, but we're not going to care, I don't think. There we go. And then with a little bit of the, what is this one? There's milk chocolate. It's the mystery color. A little bit of cocoa, then we'll highlight the belly of the bag right here where it goes behind that. And that's almost what I ended up with, is just a little dry brush kind of moment. We don't need this to be super detailed, it's just a hint that it's Santa's bag. Okay, and that just shows that there's something there. I'm going to base our little hook over here for the lantern in cocoa, and then we'll line the lantern wires, if you will, with cocoa. And don't worry, we're going to reline it again. Okay, then we'll go into our milk chocolate, and we'll line it again. Act like that's a little shading right there. And then you can shade a little deeper with some soft black at the top. Okay, I have to wait for that to dry. Where that's coming out. And there. And at the top. Let's tickle on a little bit of soft black. Okay, to get our lantern glow, we're going to use our round brush, and we're going to start out with a little bit of cocoa, and we're just going to squibble in some cocoa. Wipe out my brush and go directly into our mustard seed color, and squibble in some of that. wipe my brush off and dip into a little bit of white. Okay, and then our magicalness gets to happen. We're going to take our Easy Dot tool, and this is a really wonderful little invention that I scoffed at completely, so if you're a scoffer, you'll appreciate this. These are little dot tools. There's two sets of them. There's this small size and then one with bigger ones. And they're numbered so you know exactly which one is going to be the biggest on this wheel. No more guessing. For example, my favorite brush that I've been using has this flat back end that's like a mixing tool, which is fantastic, but there's no dot going to be coming off of that. And yet here's a round brush that has the biggest back end that I've ever seen. So you don't have to pick up every brush to guess which one you need. This, you just pick up the tool and you've got what you need. You're going to take your white, and you always use fresh paint to dot with. Okay, so I'm going to take my white and I'm going to start dotting around like it's shooting, stuff is shooting out of my lantern. I want it a little bit random. I don't want it just radiating out in perfect radiations, if you will. And so we'll dot around. And now we need to have magic dust that is going underneath our sleigh. Okay, so we're going to have some little magic-y dust things. Wipe off your tool from time to time so that you don't get build-up and super... You can have curls, you can have stars, you can have stuff trickling off our reindeer's feet. Whatever you want. You're just going to fill that in with your stardust. Okay, I went ahead and went crazy. I went and put a little magic dust coming out of his hand and around the tree and presents, and I didn't do that in the first piece that I did. But I thought, you know, why wouldn't there be magic coming out of Santa's sack and stuff? And I like that the moon is right there, and I don't feel like it's distracting. Maybe with the moon off to its side, that would be a little bit more distracting with the white dots. But in this case, I like it. So as I'm looking at my piece, now is where I've got wet dots everywhere. This is where I'll switch from something that goes round and round to my bridge. This will protect me from dipping straight into dots I shouldn't be dipping into. I'm going to load a little bit of white only on my brush, and I'm going to perk up the Santa's beard. Okay, I feel like his face is just a little bit drab. Makes me just a little bit happier, maybe a couple more white dots in the middle of his face, on his eyebrows. Okay, that's better. Okay, we're going to dance around with some tree trunks. We're going to use graphite. I'm going to use my bridge because my dots still aren't dry. And then what I want to do is I want to bring some tree trunks down here randomly. And I kind of want to start at the same about ground level. I'm going to keep these in the background. Okay, now you may ask yourself, why am I doing that? Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to use those as our anchor kind of guidelines. And we're going to bring up trees into our skyline, if you want to call it a skyline. And so I want very watery. That was too watery. I lost all my color. Very, very watery, just like we did with the other thing. And we want to bring up different levels of trees, different heights. They're not connected, they're not, oops, and they're not curly. I don't want curly tree trunks. Okay, they're just another layer in our sky. Blot and blot. Okay, and now we're going to go in with some gray. So I'm going to use
slate gray. And it's real watery. And these are going to kind of be like little ghost trees. And they'll just be back there along with. Layer them. Don't worry about them. And that's the kind of effect that you'll do all the way around the box if you're painting on that round box.
You'll just continue your tree line to the back.
Okay, now we can go in on a couple of these and we can use our gray, but in a solid form, and we can pile on some snow onto our branches. Keep it kind of more within the scene.
So now you've got a little bit of a
Snowy branch kind of a look, and then just wiping it on kind of thick. Choose your branches according to what looks like it would hold some snow. If they're too upright, then obviously it won't hold snow. And you could also keep them in like the center of interest, meaning that
wherever that moon glow is going to be shining.
okay, so keep it more towards the center. And now I need to decide if I have enough. And maybe do we want a little bit of snow on some of our back trees? So I could add just a little bit of snow to one side or the other to some of those.
Okay, just a little bit here and there. It's just going to make us look a little bit deeper.
Okay, next we need to put in our main trees. And those are going to get greener. And so we're going to use our evergreen, and we're going to use black green. And we might have a touch of our Prussian blue. Okay, with great gobs of water in our brush and pounding, stippling, we're going to just start making some greener trees. And we're not going to worry about those buildings. We kind of want it to go over the building. You could take your Q-tip and just kind of wipe that off, and that would be enough cleanup if you don't want to do cleanup. And so start and just make a V kind of shape. You can make as many as you want, as few as you want. Oops, I went into gray, which probably won't be a bad thing over here. Big old tree over here. This is getting like where the foreground is. Okay, we need a little one up in front here. Okay, now that you have the tree shapes on your piece, now what you're going to do is you're going to take your, this is highly technical here, you're going to take the big messy palette, you're going to load the heel of your brush into black green. I didn't get that color out. Into black green, okay, and I've got the original green on my brush, so that's just there. And then let's go ahead and go into the slate, is it slate gray? Yeah, slate gray. And we'll just blend that, and then we'll stipple, like so. And we might even want a little bit more of our lighter gray.
Gray sky.
Yeah. But we could go do that next. Like we might add that piece next. I don't know if that's going to be too dark or not. We'll add a touch. Now, you've got that. We're going to flip our piece around. And that's not true. We're going to flip it back around. Now what we want to do is we want to stipple our trees starting with the snow at the top, okay? And so we'll stipple that, just give it a tree shape, right? But we want to stipple it so that we get some dark green. Then the next level, I'm doing this backwards, I am upside down. Dyslexia. Okay, so we want to stipple with the dark tucked right underneath that snowy bough, and then twist around, and that gives us that little bit of a look like the branches have gotten snowed on. And we're going to do more stuff to this, so don't feel like you're done when you get this done. So I'll stipple that, and then da-da-da, and da-da-da. And just overlay things. That's a great way to get a shadow effect all at one fell swoop. Okay, and as we get over here to these edges, like we can put the top one on manually, but as we get near the edges, you'll want to leave it less bright, and that will come with the next step. Okay, so those are our little front trees. And then we'll tuck those into and behind buildings and things like that. Okay, now that we have that piece done, we'll get out I think I'm going to have to hit the blow dryer with this one. Alright, next we're going to shade using our same angle brush. We're going to start out with the slate gray. And what we're going to do is we're going to shade more of the front, and we're going to allow it to have little boughy kind of branch type fluffs that we pull up into the tree. Almost like a little squiggle. Okay, so that's like our snow dipping down. And that just gives it a fluffier look. And notice that we're just using that really dark gray. But because of our contrast of our painting, the really dark gray reads really white. Okay, so you draw some of that up. Make sure you're drawing it into the center of the tree. If you need anything fixed, right now is the time to do it. Keeping it fairly liquidy, not too wet but not too dry. Make sure they bow down just a little bit in the middles. What I want you to do is do these trees really loosely, because while they seem very important, they're really just filler, for the scene. And we're going to do some stuff with some light that will dream them up and mist them up. Now over here I want to be really careful that I don't get too light. Okay, so see how we have just that little bit of foresty trees. If you look at any of these things by themselves, they look a little bit strange. But that is what loose painting is all about, is you take and you make an impression of things, and it's not photorealism. So just squiggle. Do a little top knot. Okay, now we'll go into the lighter gray, which is the gray sky, and that's going to be in our center of interest. Okay, so we want that to be, so we've got our moon glow coming down here. That means that some of these little dudes right here are going to get really brightened up. Okay, but notice I didn't put it everywhere. I'm putting it up through the middle. I'm going to give this a little bit brighter. A little moon glow action going on. We really want the center of interest coming down into the scene where the church is. So we're going to allow those to get brighter. And don't get there all at one time though. Go ahead and brighten them up without going ridiculous, because we have some work to do with our church and our foreground and all that, and you don't want to make a mistake and go too bright. So I'm going to go ahead and set that foundation. Okay, I think that's enough brightened right there in the middle. Do you see how they're, obviously the light is on them. Okay, we'll go ahead and add our paths and our snowdrifts while we have our colors out. The paths and snowdrifts are not on there. Hey. Okay, so we'll take out our Ghost Rider. Okay, and we'll decide where this little pathy poo wants to go. It's got to come out the front door, and then it's going to meander, and then it's going to come wider. Okay, so we'll do this. And then we might want some drifts there, and then our front churchy poo can go there, and then this little guy over here can come out this way. We want everything kind of leading into this little area right here. We don't want to bring too much light down here at the bottom, because that's where we're going to have our framed shading. So now we need to make some snowdrifts. Alright, now what I've done with the snowdrifts is I've taken them and I've just kind of piled them up kind of sideways with little C-stroke whoopie-doos. And not everywhere. They wouldn't be piled up like exactly evenly if they're little snowdrifts. They could be drifts, they could be shoveled. This is, in this case, kind of a shoveled little pile. Okay, so we'll do the same thing over here. Notice that that little path looks like a runway. It is leading your eye straight into that house. And that is one of the effects that we want. So now, as we get further away from this church, we'll darken things up and go into a darker gray mix. And I don't want this house over here to be such a beacon. Okay, so we'll just lighten it up or similarize the contrast. And I didn't get that blended all the way. Okay, so, and then down here in front of the church we're stronger. Okay, now we've got to highlight those little snowdrifts, and we need to decide where else we're going to drift at. We're going to drift in front of trees, next to buildings. Things are going to collect in spots. Okay, so maybe we'll bring this down just a little bit and give it another layer. Start building over here down below the tree line. That's going to show us that there is different levels of treeness going on, like different landscape levels. And just a little C-stroking. Okay. That's a little dark, a little bright. Okay, now we've got a good start. Now let's wash on a little bit of our gray, very watery, and let's make a little path. And let's go ahead and a little bit wash across this whole scene down here, not too far south. And where's my color? Because our dark blue is a little too dark blue down here. I would have liked it to have just a little bit more lightness, and so what can we do? We can just put that in. Not across our trees though, just across the pathways. This will add another level of blowing. Now we'll shade and wash our building fronts with Prussian blue, and we want to shade where the moon doesn't shine. Okay, so we'll go ahead and wherever we think that it's going to be the darkest under roof lines, and you can just kind of wash shade just to make that look like it's cast in the shadow. Always going to be the darkest right where things come around the corner. Smoothen that out. Tuck your angle in and then turn your brush and make it flat to get a good chisel. Okay. And if it's not dry enough, you won't get a very good float. I mean, if it's not wet enough. And then we'll have to do underneath all the roof lines. Because they would always have casting shadows happening. And don't forget the roof lines you've forgotten as well. I'm going to leave this little house here in the back. I'm just going to put some smoke up into the sky because he just doesn't seem to be seen that much, so I think that'll be okay. And we'll do the same thing, but with light to show that we are on the moony side of the moon. And that's going to be too light. So we'll bring this out so that it... So see, I'm floating right over my tree branches. I'm not worried about them at all. After you spatter and you do all the different things that will be happening here, you won't notice if you've got some tree branches in the way. This little roofy poo is a little bit strange, but okay. Then we'll go in with the next lightest color and just let that walk into the scene. Okay, we can give a little bit of a chisel edge highlight. I'm not high enough on that. Give our little chimneys a little chisel edge too. Alright, we can sketch on our windows with, oops, their triple threat. And if you love details, my friend Mary Jo is a detail person, and it would drive her crazy to leave off a lot of the little putsy details like I'm doing. If you love details, put them on. Have fun with it. Get lost in your own little world in this village. I like details, but I like the painted kind of details. Does that make sense? A little bit different. Okay, now we're going to fill in the windows with cocoa. And that's just a base coat. We're going to shade our windows with milk chocolate. And I'll do all the one sides first, and then I'll go back and do the other side, and then they'll be about dry and ready to go. Flip it over. Keep your floats real skinny or it'll take over your windows. Like that one. The highlights are going to be just tapped on with a round brush using mustard seed. Get that glow. Now, I wasn't sure when I was doing this whether or not the windows ought to be lit up or dark, because Santa doesn't come when you're sitting there waiting for him. But I decided maybe that the hoods on the rooftops made such a clatter that they all got up to see what was the matter, kind of a thing. That's kind of the theory I was going for. And all of the frames on these things are, on the doors and windowsills, are in gray sky. And that's just lined. And you'll do the cross thingies as well. Now we'll load a little bit of white. And we will intensify all of the fallen snow and put in the, there's got to be like a glow where the village is, where the moon is shining on the village and the stardust is falling down and all of that kind of stuff. So let's highlight some of the snow first. So we don't want to cover up all the gray because then that robs us of the depth. And we can make the shapes be a little bit different so that it looks layered. And we want to put a little bit of snow on the roof. Okay. You can have some coming off of the top of the roof here. Have fun with it. Pretend like, there's a snowstorm when you're a kid and just play. And we'll get a little bit of brighter on the trees. But not on every tree. We got a little bit of snow falling off of this roof, but piled behind the chimney. I think the most fun part is that you can just make it be however you want. If you don't like to shovel snow, make the paths be already shoveled. You could put icicles, do all kinds of fun stuff. Okay, so now we'll get how far over do we want to go, huh? Gotta turn it around to be able to get the right angle. Ourselves a little highlight on our cross. Okay, I think now we need to give ourselves some smoke coming out of our chimneys. We're going to go into the small crescent brush, and we are going to scumble first with gray sky. And we'll just bring that smoke out of our chimney, our chimblies. And make the smoke interesting. Like, don't just make it go one direction. Well, I guess make it go in any direction you want. I want it to kind of reach up and be going towards those little reindeers. Kind of fills that space in the sky. Oops. And we want to be careful about doing that. We don't want everything to mimic the line next to it, so make sure you're doing something different. Okay. And so we've got this line here, so we'll make this one have smoke that kind of mimics that line. And then it enhances the artwork. Okay, next we're going to increase the smokiness with some white. And so same thing with the snow. We don't want to do it everywhere. We just want to accent. Okay, and you can decide how much smoke is coming out of your fire. Okay, so see what I did? Scumbled too much, too strong, and so just get your finger in there and erase it. Of course, you heard me panic as well, right? What did I say earlier? No panicking. Boy, when you know you've messed up, you really know it. Okay. So now we've got some smoke leading us and connecting the upper thing with the lower thing. I think that's probably about enough. And now we'll make a yellow cast, which is coming from his little lantern. I don't know how realistic that is, but that's okay. Santa is magical. So now what we've got to do is everything that's going to be like we want to focus on is going to get this yellow cast. Okay, so we want to be on this path. Here. And that's just a glaze. I'm kind of a little heavy on this. So I'll go with the back of my brush and wash it down just a little bit. I'm going to have a little bit on some of these trees. And all on that same side. So it's going to be on that little side right there. And I might want to go ahead and just increase a bit. Okay, I think just squint at it and see if you like it. And now let's make his lantern be just a little bit brighter glow, since it is a glowing night sky kind of light. Let's bring it down. Keep it out of our smoke. Wah! Yeah, I like that a little bit better. Okay, we're about there. So we've got these little tchotchke details, which are so insignificant, especially in the smaller size. Things like the wreath on the church door. It's just going to be a tap, 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 tap. The Christmas tree is just green with the with whatever color that green is. There it is, forest green. Add a couple little dots in there, and then we put some lights and a ribbon, and then we're good there. Okay, we're going to spatter around our piece, and I'm going to go ahead and get the Artist Buddy. Another good thing about the Artist Buddy is that it allows you to rotate and not get paint all over your board. I am going to close my laptop though and move it out of the way. Not a good thing to paint all over your laptop. Okay, so we're going to spatter with thinned Prussian blue. Really tap it off. I don't want to make big blobs everywhere, and make sure that you're thin enough. If you're not thin enough, then you'll end up with big fat chunky blobs of stuff, and it can be messy. Alright, so I want to do all around these edges. And maybe a little bit more down here. Reload as you need to. I think spattering almost to me is almost as important as any of the art that you do while you're painting. It just combines and makes everything perfect at the end. Okay. And it has a diffusing filter or something like that. Okay, so now we're going to go into some of our light. Let's go into the gray sky. And we need to make a little bit of snowy snow. Okay, and I snowed a little bit more on this side than I did on this side over here. But now I think I'll balance it out and maybe I'll snow a little bit more over here. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay, now we'll get out a little white. Okay, and then we'll get a little bit of white down here. I think I'm loving it. Maybe a little bit more white in his mooniness. Love it. Okay. I think that part is done. We'll set this off and let it dry, and we'll start on the backer board. Okay, I'm going to save myself a washing step. I've got my varnish sponge, got my finished project. I want to make sure that I have anything erased that needs to be erased, and I think I'm pretty good because I sketched a bunch of stuff. And then what I will do is I'm going to get my gloss varnish on here, and gloss just makes the colors pop. So I got a little touch of green up there, but I think I'll just not worry about that. I'll do this, and so where I'm saving myself some time is I'm not going to have to wash my sponge when I get done, because next I want to do this bottom board. Okay, so I'll move this off to the side to dry, and then I'll just go ahead and put my multi-purpose sealer on my palette, and I'll get my board sealed, and then I can go directly from that to the color that I'm going to base coat. Okay, so that saves me washing in between varnishing, washing in between multi-purpose sealer, and gets me right to my base coat color. Alright, let's get you a little bit better view here. I'm going to use Prussian blue at first. Just going to take the lid off and pour some of that puppy out. And my still wet sponge. And I'm just going to go ahead and give the back of this board an even base coat of this and allow it to dry. Alright, I'm going to re-wet this outer area where the words are going to be with the blue and a little bit of water. On the box I had to use extender, drying time extender, but on this I don't have to because it's a smaller area. Okay, so I'll just pick up a little bit of the blue end, and I'll just slippy slap just a little bit of that through this area. I want this to be darker, but I don't want it to be so dark. Okay, and then we'll lay this on top and see what we think. Okay, that adds just a little bit of interest out there, and then once the letters are there, I think that'll help a lot. Okay, we're going to take the white Wonder brush, and we're going to spatter up through the middle area. Attempting not to spatter myself. A new shade of blue. Ah, spattering is fantastic. Okay, I'm going to need a little bit more of the Prussian blue. Okay, I'm going to spatter with the Prussian blue, and I think I'm going to mix some black with it.
like a blackly, just a little bit of something extra right there around the edge. Just one more little speckle of detail. And then we'll let this dry. Okay, I've got this faux finish slip slappy background done on here, and I've spattered with a little bit of the blue. I'm going to mix, I think I'm going to mix, oh that's black, no wonder that doesn't look right. I'm going to mix the Prussian blue with slate gray. And I'm going to come up with a kind of lightish gray color, grayish bluish color. And then I'll thin it with water. And you don't want it to be too bright. And we're going to just base outline, and when you use a round brush to base, that needs to be a little bit lighter. What you do is you put your brush down. Way too much paint. When you brush mix, be careful that your brush doesn't have like a mountain of paint on it. You push your brush and then let the brush slide into the finish. Okay. And we just base coat all of our letters. Okay, we're going to mix a little bit, or just maybe actually not mix anything, but go straight to the gray color, slate gray. And then we'll just highlight right down the middle section of all the letters. If it takes a couple strokes, that's fine. And then you could go into a little bit of white to finish it off if you think that that's what yours needs. And that gives it just that nice little highlight straight through the middle. And our last lettering technique that we're going to do for this project is we'll use black, and we're going to do drop shadow. And drop shadow just means we're going to line all the way on all the left sides in this case, and under. Okay? Now to deepen the edges, just to rich them up a little bit, I'm going to glaze with the Ultra Blue Deep to bring my color families kind of together, just on the corners. It's almost reverse glazing. I'm making it be a little bit more bluey blue. But not electric-y blue. And I said just on the corners. I can't tell if it's wet and blended or not, so I'm going ahead and just wetting and blending that in. Shows clean on my palette, so around the edges, around the corners. Pop that up just a little bit. Okay, as I'm getting ready to glue this, I want to mark and measure and make sure that I'm at 2 inches all the way around. So I've got this little clear flexible ruler, and now I'll go ahead and mark with my little white pencil where it goes, so that when I lay it down I'll know what I'm aiming for. Okay, and I think that's turned out pretty darn cute. The way we're going to glue it is we're going to just hot glue this down, so I'll flip it over, I'll put some hot glue on here, I'll lay it and press it down, then I'll varnish this piece after I get it glued on there. And the varnish will erase my little ceramic pencil lines from the triple threat.